Welcome to Leadership, Relationships, and Change. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, the Relationship Help Doctor, and I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, the Change Leader. And if you want to look us up and see what we're about, there's where you find us. So we're going to have a really exciting conversation today about overcoming inertia and creating momentum. And I think this applies to our life and to our business and to everything that we are actually doing while we're breathing on this planet.
Hey,
so,
you know, I need to take a nap at this point.
Well, you just allow the inertia to enfold you and we'll continue. It's true. I mean, we have that personal inertia where everything seems like a huge effort, or the flip side of it, I don't see anything that I need to do differently. And that certainly appears in our work with companies, doesn't it, Drumm?
Can you spell resistance to change?
Yeah, I mean, we have these people whose mantra is, we've already tried that and it didn't work. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Those two phrases that come out of the same person's mouth every time you talk about moving forward or tweaking something in a positive direction, or throwing out a system and saying this is antiquated and doesn't serve us. They're the ones that are reaching out to grab and no, don't take that away from us.
Mm-hmm. I worked with a client a while back. Their executive director had been in place for 30 plus years. He didn't like technology.
Oh, dear.
Another organization I know has an ERP application and enterprise resource planning, runs the back end of all the software, business processes, etc. There's a module in that will allow you to automate signatures on documents for approvals, etc. This particular organization doesn't like that. What they do is they print out the paper, sign it, and take it over to the other department.
Wow,
I don't understand.
You know, I mean, how many people are fearful in that way? And the media perpetuates that. You should be fearful because, someone's going to hack you, someone's going to get you, someone's going to catch you out. And so they're afraid, and they don't know that there are systems that are pretty darn safe and tried and true that allow you to do business at a much faster pace.
It all comes back to people. When I used to investigate, I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback in my microphone again. So if I'm stopping, that's why. I used to investigate airplane accidents when I was in the Navy. And one of the things that we always did was look at the chain of events. We used to call it the danger chain. If you broke one link in the chain, an accident wouldn't happen. You could always trace it back to one person.
Mm.
A decision that was made, a policy that was made, whatever it was, could go back to one person. And it takes one person to overcome inertia. I would guess that you see this a lot in relationships where people get stuck, they're fearful to move. Maybe it's part depression. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think people are generally are afraid of the unknown. Mm-hmm. So how do I know that what I'm moving towards is better than what I have? And they're risk adverse. So they're afraid to make a shift in case it doesn't go in the direction they want. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it went in a bad direction. It's just not the one they want. What I call them is they're comfortably uncomfortable. In the real world, it's, well, it's on now for 15 years, and I'm sure it'll keep going. And I say to them, yes, but are you happy? Well, no, who is? Well, it could be you. You deserve to take the steps to become happy, to become more communicative, and to be able to feel the love and feel the cherishing and feel the support and connection. But everybody has to take a step here. And so it's the fear that they will lose something that they have, or that when they move forward, it won't be better for them. So they'd rather just sit in that comfortably uncomfortable situation. In fact, on my website at forrelationshiphelp.com, there are free checklists, and one of them is the relationship checklist. It's free. You can just go and take it, and it'll give you a printout of where you are in your current relationship, and one of those categories is comfortably uncomfortable. But in organizations, I've worked with so many groups, and there's always that one person, it seems, who is just the rock that will not move. And
well, obviously, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and moss is growing all over it, as they say, like some of the creatures in the cartoons. We're doing okay. Let's just keep going.
It's interesting because I'm an expert when it comes to doing organization change. And I found you've got 4 different groups of people. The first group is the people who like to change. They're your early adopters with technology, things along those lines. You've got your second group, which is the group that kind of just moves along. They look at things and then change when it makes sense. This is the majority. You've got those folks that you talked about just now, the cynics, and they go, doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to work. Well, why isn't it going to work? I know. I've been here a long time. It's not going to work. And then you've got your skeptics. Your skeptic's going to say, that's not going to work. And you say, well, why? And they'll give you concrete reasons. When we do change, skeptics are my best friend, because they're going to tell me where the potholes are, the dead bodies buried, whatever you call it. But they're really going to help you navigate those landmines. Man, we're full of metaphors today. They'll help you navigate the course to make sure that you can get things implemented properly.
Yeah, but the good thing about a skeptic is that they can elucidate you on what their thought process is. When you're dealing with the rock, it's emotional, it's fear. It's like, no, I am not willing to do that. And another reason that they hang on to their rockness is that it might mean more work for them, and they are comfortably entrenched in what they're doing, and it's become somewhat effortless for them. And everything that looks like new engagement, new work, new system is just something that they would like to avoid. So
Absolutely.
it becomes personal to them as opposed to progressive for the organization. So they're sitting in a very personal oriented space as opposed to being a team player. That often happens.
Very much so. And I think the point that you made about fear is really important. Most people don't change, and it's not because they're in a great place. They're just afraid of what it might become. Just like that relationship example. Are you happy? Well, no. But if I change, I might be more unhappy than I am now.
Yeah, and a piece that goes with that is that if I agree to look at change, I might be seen as part of the problem, and I don't want to risk that.
Which goes to people's self-esteem.
Yes. And so if I open myself to looking at what's going on in the entire group or company or whatever unit we're looking at, I'd rather be under the radar if I'm a rock, right? So the fact that perhaps I would have to step up or update my skills or learn about technology or have different operating hours, whatever it is. I don't want to. You know, it's a personal use of energy that they are absolutely holding on to, keeping the status quo. And we all know that when we throw the balls up in the air, it can get messy. And so, you know, just to keep the metaphors going, and we don't want that. You know, if we're a rock, we don't want that. That is effort. And effort, I'm a rock. I don't want to do anything. I am at a slow vibration. That's what makes me a rock.
But you got to be careful if you're a rock that the pile driver doesn't come along and break you apart. Keeping with the metaphors, of course.
Yes, and you know, they're being dynamited out of your place can be a terribly unsettling position.
Yes, but you can make all sorts of smaller rocks.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm not suggesting that these people are not doing a great job and contributing in their way, but they are absolutely resistant to change, or even the conversation about change. Like even a hypothetical, if we went down this path, what do you think would happen? They're often not open to the creativity and the innovative thought that can just play with an idea either. And this comes from a particular kind of personality style or energetic style. Many people are familiar with lots of indicators, you know, where you use Myers-Briggs or strength indicator or whatever. My partner and I created one that has 6 parts, and the rock is what we call agent energy. It's that I stay settled. I want to hold on to the status quo. And an indication of that would be in a Myers-Briggs, a high J. Somebody makes up their mind once, such as, I really like this restaurant. So you ask them, where would you like to go? Always to that restaurant. I like the food. I order the same thing every time I go. An agent will do that. Why would I change? This is working.
Yeah. Well, then you also get the story about going to Wichita, which is one of the ones that you always hear going through doctoral studies. It's like everyone just makes that assumption that they want to go to Wichita for ice cream every Sunday afternoon, until finally somebody speaks up and says, you know, I really don't like ice cream. Everyone looks at him like, what do you mean? The more conversation comes out, they understand half the people don't like the other half of people that are there. They don't want ice cream. They don't like Wichita. And if they just started communicating in the first place, they never would have been stuck in the same place that they were.
Right. And they wouldn't have built the resentment every time they went for ice cream in Wichita.
Exactly.
And I think that's the lethal blow, Drumm, is when people are not participatory and they are not communicative, and then they sit and seethe. They just build these resentments and cases against other people, and they impute motive and they make assumptions. That's really problematic in any organization, and those people are there. Now, you know, I particularly focus on working with the partners, the exes, the adult children, and the co-workers of chronically difficult people. And if you want to learn more about that, I can see that you can go to, the light here is funny, hijackals.com. I call them hijackals because there are these people who are looking for power. They just have a deep need for power in their psychological makeup, and it is so deep that it overruns everybody and everything. It is the need to win, the need to be right, the need to direct, the need to make the changes they want, the right to not do anything that anybody else wants. It's very, very specific, and when you get all those traits in one person, I call them a hijackal. And
some people call him Donald Trump.
Those are wise people, in my opinion.
We'll probably get a Twitter storm in the next 30 seconds.
I welcome it. The thing is that, the definition of hijackals, now I have to throw that in after the Donald Trump remark. Hijackals are people who hijack relationships for their own purposes while relentlessly scavenging them for power, status, and control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we can directly link that to the person aforementioned. So hijackals exist in business too. They're the person that nobody wants to sit beside, nobody wants to upset, nobody wants to have to go to. I'll tell you a little personal story. I've just been to Canada, where I'm from, and I've seen some friends that I grew up with. And this is the first time I felt so validated. 3 of my friends, separate and apart from one another, told stories about my mother, who was a hijacker. And my one friend said, and this is what people can relate to, she said, my dad used to send me to the store for cigarettes. My parents owned a store, and there was a small store between her house and my parents' store. And she said, I'd happily go to cigarette shopping for my dad if I went to Watson's store, because that was easy. But if he wanted cigarettes and stamps, I had to go to your family store, and I had to face your mother. And she said, I would dawdle, I would do anything, I would lose the money, I would do whatever I could to not have to face your mother. And it was validating for me, because when you grow up as an only child and you're experiencing that all the time, and your mother's doing the best she can to put this wonderful face on herself. She was the fundraiser for hospice, for heaven's sake. So everybody thinks she's this generous, giving, warm person. She wasn't, not at all. But to be validated, to have someone who had that experience right while I was having it, who never said it to me until now, Sure. Amazing to hear. And there are these people that we don't want to sit beside, we don't want to engage in conversation, we don't want to be put on a team with, and all of that. Now, where this applies particularly is we happen to be working in an organization that is owned by the person who created the company, who is an entrepreneur, which hijackals tend to be, so they don't have to report to anybody and they don't have to explain to anybody. And then you get a company that has dysfunction top down.
Mm-hmm. How do you relate this to overcoming inertia and creating momentum?
Well, if you have searched within yourself, first of all, to find out what's up in your life, you may have some of these same fears, these fears of change. You may open your eyes to the fact, well, oh yeah, what they're talking about is, I don't like change much either. When change conversation comes up at work, I tend to want to be the rock, or I want to agree with the rock, or whatever. So maybe I can open my eyes to that. But if I'm in an organization, then I can understand that I need strategies to deal with the hijackals. Oftentimes people come to me and they say, there's this person, and I just know what they're going to tell me. What do? I want to keep my job. So to overcome the inertia of doing something, speaking up, and finding safe strategies, although safe is in quotation marks with hijackals, safe, wise strategies is a really wise thing to do, because your life is going by when you're sitting there doing that job. And I don't think we can ever forget that, Drumm, right? I mean, our life is going by while we're doing that.
I think you're right. But in relating hijackals to this topic, I think that many hijackals are able to create momentum. Maybe it's not in a positive way, but as an entrepreneur, you need to keep driving that meter forward.
I absolutely agree. And I think on the creating momentum side, we can have the creative, innovative, and sometimes hijackal person who will do it because it's in their own best interest to do it. And so they will drag people along, and hijackals are usually not at all backward about coming forward or firing people. So you don't want to play in my place, my sandbox? Great. Go down the street. Here, I'll give you a ticket. Right?
They also, I think, run by their own rules, too. If I take a look at the big story out of Fox News over the last few weeks, where the president, 20 years, has been forced to resign because of sexual harassment charges. If they're writing their own rules, the guy was a brilliant entrepreneur. He got Fox News to be as high in the rankings as they are, but he also had his own set of rules. And those rules, 20 years ago, they weren't right, but they were more accepted. Now, they're not as accepted. And somebody comes forward, look what happened. Although we did get a $40 million severance package, so go figure.
Yeah, so he's happy on his yacht. However, the debris that was left behind could cause the entire organization to just stop for a bit. Like that inertia that comes like, whoa, we got rid of him, now what? And so everybody just wants to sit and heal and regroup. And, you know, so many times over the last 30 years, I've gone in where this is exactly the thing that's happened. Everybody's so beaten down, worn out, exhausted. They've lost their spark. They've lost the creativity. They've lost their belief in themselves. They don't feel safe putting ideas forward anymore because they go nowhere. Now, this may not be at all what was going on with this fellow, because obviously he was very successful. But to respond to your making their own rules, that's what happens, because when somebody like that gets to the top of the pile, particularly if they're a hijackal, they believe that they're above all rules. So they can change the rules in a blink of an eye if it suits them, but they will be in charge of those rules.
One of the things that I'm hearing came out in the news today is Trump has asked 3 times, why can't I use nuclear weapons first?
Why can't I use what?
Nuclear weapons first.
He's asked that question?
Yeah.
Well, that is a QED as far as I'm concerned. A person who would ask that question is the antithesis of someone who could create a humane world.
Yeah. Oh,
that's scary. You know, it was really nice being on holiday in Canada because I didn't get the Trump news. It was a nice respite from the insanity of the hijackal. In fact, I was just invited to put together a group of people who work with hijackals and the whole topic in order to have an online discussion about Donald Trump and the psychological nature and the possibilities of things. So I'm not keen to do it, but I was invited to do it, and it's something I am considering. But
this is where that 2-letter word is really a smart thing.
Well, I have said no to everything that has come by. I don't click on anything political on Facebook, you know, none of that. But when a world recognized person says, I would like you to do this and gather these people together, it was something that I said I would think about. I said my tendency is to say I don't think that this is a valuable contribution from my point of view for participating, but I will think about it. But I don't like putting myself in the line of fire on purpose when there's somebody with a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. It's also interesting, getting back to change, creating momentum. We've got resistance to change. And that comes from what I call the 3 Ds. Decide, disseminate, defend. That's how most change is done. Whereas if someone who supports the change, they're not going to have the inertia. They're not going to resist. And the way that I found best to do that is if you get them involved early on. People support what they help create.
Right.
They want to be involved in the decisions that's going to affect them before the decision is made. And so that's one way to overcome that resistance to change and to create that momentum. You create that buzz, people are excited about it, and it'll move forward.
So before the decision, is there something that allows for a process that engages people at that level, as you just said?
Yes. Yeah. For instance, doing a strategic plan, we have something that we call the attunement process, where the core planning team will develop strategies and a vision, whatever those type of things are. And then you'll take those out to your key stakeholders, both inside and outside the organization, for the attunement. What do you think? Are we on the right path? How is this going to affect you? What input do you have? How can we make this better? Mm-hmm. And that input comes back to the core planning team. They can put it in, they can not put it in. That's the way the game is played. But the folks who had the input, especially when something is put in, they will say, they see it go, wow, that was my contribution. They're going to support it.
Yeah. Well, if you like what you just heard, go to thechangeleader.com and hear more. So that process, how do you know, and you've been doing this for a long time, Drumm, how do you calibrate that it is time to make the decision?
When I see the majority of people are on board with it, when I see that the light bulb has come on, they see new possibility. And we've all sat around the table and we've seen that type of thing happen. You start to feel a tangible buzz in the room. When you get that, and at the beginning, you've already set up the decision of consensus. Consensus doesn't mean you fully agree with it, but you'll fully implement it. And once the door's open, we go out and talk to people. We're all fully on board with it. So go ahead.
There's a great book that I got 20 years ago, and in it, it's got a grid of agreement. Have you seen that? Where it's sort of if I remember correctly, it's an 8-step grid of agreement. Like, I absolutely agree fully. I agree with most concepts in here. I agree with enough to never stand in the way of it. I'm completely neutral on the issue. I'm not in favor of it, but I won't do anything to obstruct it. You haven't seen that? Well,
no, I haven't.
Happy to share that with you, because I've used that to much success at that point of calibration. Like, if we decide this now, where would you sit on this grid?
Mm-hmm.
And so you get an idea of, if there's 2 people who just say, I'm going to drag my feet, and the rest of the people say, I won't stand in the way of this, I will support it, then kind of no. But then you can also ask the people on the lower 2/3 of the grid, what do you need? What's missing in order to move forward with this? What would it take to move the needle so that you were further up on the grid?
Sure.
Because it goes back to resentment, right? If they feel it's thrust upon them, even if we already know they're not thrilled about it, they can get resentful, and then they can start undermining.
Absolutely. So how would you sum up today's topic?
Well, I think that we've only just begun to touch on it, because we didn't get to personal inertia and personal momentum, which I think are the way you contribute to that of an organization. Mm-hmm. But I would say that understanding that there are people who are fearful. They're not wrong. They're not bad people. There are people who are fearful. This is what's going on in my processing arena. And that we have to recognize that. And then I would hope that we have another conversation at some time to talk about what happens when you get into personal inertia.
Let's do it next time.
Sure, let's do that. And how would you sum it up?
I would say that we talked on a broad picture about organizational insertion, how hijackals can come in and help with inertia and hurt it at the same time. We talked pretty good about organizational. I think we're right. We need to go to the personal side. All
right. Well, there we have a plan. Woohoo! No inertia here. We have an agreed upon plan. So as Drumm is holding up, you can go to forrelationshiphelp.com if you want to learn more about my work, and you can go to thechangeleader.com to learn more about Drumm's work. We're happy that you listened to this segment. There are lots of segments on my YouTube channel, which is For Relationship Help, and soon to be on Dr. Drumm McNaughton's new website, which is constantly growing and developing. So please visit us again. Come and join in the conversation. And until then, we'll talk soon, Drumm.
Take care, my friend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.